Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
All right, now, thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Tate, and today is the eve of UFC 210, which is Daniel Cormier versus Anthony Rumble Johnson. And today has been just full of controversy. Today was the weigh-in, and it's kind of like the storm before the storm, because it sure was heck wasn't the calm before the storm. When the weigh-in was going on, I was just expecting to check out the fighters right before the big day, but then the weigh-in happens and like all hell breaks loose. First off, you have the light heavyweight champion of the world, and we have a controversy with him initially missing weight, but then going back. And I mean, he didn't take like 20 minutes or an hour. He got on the scale. He was over by two pounds, I believe it was. He came back a couple of minutes later, and he was right on point. So actually, he was about a pound and a half, 1.2 pounds over. But he came back like 2 minutes later, and miraculously, he had lost 1.2 pounds. Daniel Cormier should totally give up MMA and start his own weight loss program. You could just go on there. I lost 1.2 pounds in 2 minutes, and you can too. So, I mean, we're going to talk about that today. Then the next controversy was a fight that I don't think was on a lot of people's radar. This fight was on my radar because I was looking forward to seeing Cynthia Calvillo fight again. But Cynthia's opponent is the one that ended up causing the controversy, or correction. She didn't cause the controversy. The New York State Athletic Association caused the controversy. She came in, she weighed in, and then they informed her that she couldn't fight. And the reason, it wasn't PEDs, it wasn't missing weight, it wasn't an injury, it was because she had breast implants. And surprise, surprise, in New York, you can't fight if you have breast implants, which this fight's been scheduled for quite a while. I don't understand why the New York State Athletics Association would not have told the fighters way beforehand that, hey, if you have breast implants, you can't fight in New York. So that was the big controversy. And then a few hours later, they, after talking to the doctors, The New York State Athletic Association made an exception to the rule, and they're actually going to let Pamela Gonzalez fight. So we're going to talk about that even some more. But we're going to also talk about some other fights on this card. We're going to talk about that Chris Weidman and Gegard Mousasi fight. We're going to talk a little bit about Patrick Cote and Thiago Alves. And then we're going to talk about Oliveira versus Will Brooks. So we're going to talk about all of that and a whole lot more when we come right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, now we're back, and we're going to start the show off by talking about the main event for UFC 210, which is in Buffalo, New York, and that has a big play on what happens around this event here. So we're going to talk about the main event first off, which is Anthony Rumble Johnson versus Daniel Cormier. And this was a really intriguing fight before any controversy had kind of reared its head, because the first fight between these two, even though it ended in a submission by Daniel Cormier, it was quite an intriguing fight. In the first fight, it started off with Rumble actually catching Daniel. Daniel actually stumbled, rocked him. He ended up going down. But Daniel was able to weather the storm. And then Daniel does what Daniel does best, which is grind a guy down, wrestle him, ground and pound, and break a guy down, and then eventually stop him. And that's exactly what he did with Rumble Johnson in the first fight. But since that loss, Rumble has been pretty unstoppable, knocking opponents out in no time flat, looking so impressive that in a very short time, he went from getting his title shot, losing in his championship fight and getting submitted, to battling back, overcoming that adversity, to look more spectacular than ever before. And that's hard to say with Rumble, to say he's looking more spectacular than ever before, but he kind of is. And then you also have Daniel Cormier, who has been, since getting the title, has been nothing but a outright professional, not dodging anyone, and was more than happy to give that rematch to Rumble. And as a matter of fact, once the whole situation happened where John Jones was not able to fight, Daniel made it kind of like his mission to make sure everyone realized that, hey, Rumble's is the number one contender, and he made it so that he had to fight Rumble again. And this time it's going to be very intriguing because Daniel wants to prove that the first fight was no fluke. Rumble was saying, and I don't mean to say using the excuse, but saying that he was preparing for one fight and then ended up getting another fight. He didn't really have a full camp to actually prepare for Daniel. And Daniel says he did. But, there's been a lot of banter going back and forth, but in a classy kind of way. So this is going to be a very intriguing fight. And then you have the weigh-in. The weigh-in has kind of stole the show, because when you look at this and when you look at the weigh-in, and I saw Daniel and I was like, oh boy, even before he got on the scale, he looked bad. And what I mean by bad, it looked like he had a really, really rough weight cut. And if you talk to any MMA fighter, they'll all tell you that a rough weight cut can really affect you when it comes time to fight. Even though with the new weigh-in rules, you get 24 hours to kind of rehydrate, it still will drain you. And when I was looking at Daniel just looked like a man who has been drained. He had to he actually weighed in with no clothes on. He got on the scale. He was 1.2 over. He weighed in at 206.2, which he was supposed to weigh in at 205. He steps off, and it's about two. I mean, it was about 2-3 minutes. He comes back, and he is 205 exactly. And that's where the controversy came in, because everyone's like, okay, how did he lose that 1.2 pounds so fast? And there, the first thing that I saw, that I kind of noticed is, because it didn't look like he did anything different. He didn't go run around the block. He didn't, hate to say this, but no disrespect, but run to the restroom. He kind of just came back. And the first thing I kind of noticed, and that people have talked about, is how while he was weighing in without clothes on, he had his hands on the towel, and it looked like he was pushing down on the towel to take some weight off. And that's the first controversy that we have, is that some people are talking about how he actually used the towel that the other guys were holding to put pressure on to take weight off. And there could be some truth to that. Daniel says he was holding the towel to make sure that no one, that he didn't accidentally flash himself to the audience and to that was at the weigh-in. I think there was a little bit of take a little weight off, hopefully. Then you have John Jones, who had a comment, who said he was shifting his weight to affect the scale, and it was dishonest. And I know that John Jones and Daniel Cormier does not like each other, and I'm a big fan of both of these guys, John Jones and Daniel Cormier. And I just kind of thought, in this particular case, I know they asked John to answer. I wish John would have taken the high road and just said, I'm looking forward to seeing the fight, or whatever the reason. But he pretty much said that it was a clever trick that Daniel Cormier used, and that it was dishonest, and that it needs to be checked into. It seemed from John Jones' side, it just seemed to like sour grapes, or someone who has an axe to grind. Although it doesn't make it that he may be right on that one. I'm not saying he was wrong. So, you have this situation where I don't think this will be the last that you'll hear about this situation of Daniel Daniel's weigh-in. After the fight, I could totally see a situation where the New York Athletic Association does an investigation on this one and give a ruling. And it's gonna be very interesting, because the one thing that they're gonna look at that weigh-in in detail. Did he use his hands on the towel to take some weight off? I think he did. As much as I'm a big fan of Cormier, I think he did a little bit of that. So he's going to have to answer to, how did you lose a pound and 1.2 pounds in 2 minutes? So he's going to have to, they're going to look at it. Was he shifting on the scale? Was he doing anything shifty on the scale? Did he do anything, did he use the towel? So that's going to come up, and I'm very curious to see how that affects the fight. Now, as I was saying, Daniel definitely looked drained. Rumble, he got up there and he weighed in at 203. He looked energized. He looked sharp. He looked playful. He was very relaxed. He's ready. And make no mistake, that weigh-in's going to have some effect. And if Daniel Cormier comes in a little sluggish, Rumble is the last man on the UFC roster you want to come in just a little sluggish with, because he will put you to sleep. And, going into this fight, I was looking at, I try not to make, I don't normally make my official picks until after I see the weigh-in. But before the weigh-in, I had Daniel Cormier winning pretty much. I like the last fight. Pretty much Rumble would come out, you have to avoid getting caught early, but then eventually taking him down, wearing him down, and eventually stopping him that way. So that's kind of the way I was looking at the fight going. But after seeing the weigh-in, first off, looking at Rumble's ready to go. The one thing Rumble knows from that last fight is that he faded down the stretch. Rumble looks like his cardio is on point. He's ready for a long, grind-him-out fight, it looks like. Daniel looks like he had a rough weight cut, and he's struggling. I could see a situation now. I make an adjustment, and this is someone who has been a big supporter of Daniel Cormier, and who thinks that Daniel Cormier is one of the greatest light heavyweight champions in history. And whether he win or lose, I will still say he's one of the greatest light heavyweight champions in history. But my pick after seeing the weigh-in, I'm changing it. I'm flipping. I got Rumble winning the fight because I think he's going to, and I got it by an early stoppage, a first or second round stoppage. And I've never seen anyone knock out Daniel, but if there's anyone that can, it's Rumble, especially after having a rough weight cut like he had. So that's my take on the main event. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the situation that happened with the weigh-in and in the women's match, which normally I would start off by talking about the co-main event, but I'm gonna save that for a little bit later, and we're gonna talk about the Pearl Gonzalez Cynthia Calvillo fight. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, we're back here, and we just got done talking about the Anthony Rumble Johnson, Daniel Cormier light heavyweight championship bout. We talked a little bit about how the controversy with the weigh-in and how Daniel was overweight by 1.2 pounds, how he came back about 3 minutes later, and that 1.2 pounds had magically disappeared. We talked about how Rumble in the weigh-in, Rumble looks good. Now we're going to talk about the other controversy dealing with the weigh-in. One fight that actually I've been looking forward to is the Pearl Gonzalez versus Cynthia Calvillo fight. I've been looking forward to this fight because of the fact that Cynthia Gonzalez out of Sacramento, Team Alpha Male, she had her MMA debut, and she looked spectacular. Absolutely, amazing. Her ground game is just looked so impressive. And so I was really looking forward to seeing her again, because she's kind of like this darling superstar that just kind of came out of nowhere. She got a little roughness around the edges, but she just has this way about her. So, and she's just amazing. From her first fight that I saw was just spectacular. So, and that was in August that she fought. And now with a very short turnaround, she's fighting again. Now, that was the person that I was, most intrigued by. And another reason why I was intrigued by her, because watching some of the interviews and things like that, she wasn't always, training for MMA. As a matter of fact, she talked about how, her parents worked a lot. So when she was younger, she didn't get a chance to play sports. She got married at a young age. And then once her divorce was over, when she ended up getting a divorce, she ended up going into the gym. And that's when she started picking up MMA. And she's picked up MMA at a late age. I think she was 24 years old when she decided to pick up MMA. I think it was 23 or 24. She's 29 now, and she looks amazing. So I was really looking forward to seeing her and what else she can do on the ground, and how her game has expanded from one fight to the next one. But then this controversy came in where Pearl Gonzalez, her opponent, her UFC debut, she's having her biggest fight of her life, and then she goes in and she weighs in, she makes weight, everything's fine. And then the New York State Athletic Association tells her she cannot fight, which kind of threw things off. it started the big controversy. I first saw it on ESPN, then I started looking into it a little bit more, and I'm torn with this one. I understand, in defense of the New York State Athletic Association, I understand why they would have that rule, because with breast implants, the dangerous thing about a breast implants are they can actually pop or break. And then, the leakage can get into the body, and it can be toxic to the body, and it can be very dangerous. And when you're talking about a situation where a fighter who has breast implants are getting punched, kicked, and slammed on their chest, there's a much higher risk of damage to a breast implant. The tough thing about that is you have a situation where you have a fighter and it's a personal situation, and now it is public knowledge that, she has breast implants. She's become a media name from her, not intentionally by her, but because she has breast implants, it became an intriguing story. Thinking about this, though, she's already had, she's had 7 fights already, and her doctors has consistently checked her out, and she has had no problems thus far. The New York State Athletic Association went through and they talked to her doctors, and after doing a little research and questioning the doctor, they decided to give her a pass and make an exception to the rule and allow the fight to actually happen. And so she's actually going to be fighting. The thing that's bad about this, it's not bad, it's unfortunate, is that it's been such a big media storm all day today talking about this, that instead of her, this is the biggest fight of her life. This is her UFC debut. And instead of her just concentrating on her opponent and getting her game plan on, she's answering questions about something that that has nothing to do with her strategy or the way she plans on winning. And she's been great. She's been answering all the questions and trying to be super professional. I've been so impressed with the way she's handled things. But she keeps saying, you know what? She just wants to concentrate on her win. But I do think this is going to take a little bit from her. And when you're in the ring with someone that is as tough as Calvillo is, a little distraction can be very, very, it can change the outcome of a fight. And especially with someone who is so dangerous on taking you down, so dangerous in submitting you and putting you in really bad situations while you're on the ground. You have to come in with the mindset that you got to impose your game plan onto her, and one little slip up could be the end of her. So I'm very curious about how this fight is going to play out now that the whole situation where, her breast implants have become an issue. And the question, I was thinking about, okay, she's been fighting for a while. How has this not come up in the past? Like some of the other organizations that she's, that she's fought in. I think it was like XFC and Ring Combat. She's fought in a number of different promotions, like Chicagoland fighting, and no one else is that I have to do some more research to find out, what are the dangers, because ultimately you have to be, the fighter's safety is the most important thing. And just like with Rashard Evans, the New York State Athletic Association is at least erring on, they're trying to make the best decision to make sure that fighters are safe. So initially I was kind of irritated by the New York State Athletic Association for even calling the fight off. But then, I thought about it, and, they're actually trying to do the best they can. And, when you interview, when you listen to the Athletic Association, they kind of backtrack and they say, that they didn't really call the fight off, that they were just more or less just making sure, that things were safe and making sure they were making the right decision. From everything I saw, they did call the fight off, but then make a decision and put the fight back on. So I'm definitely very interested in seeing what happens with this fight, because the winner of this fight is actually, going to be in a good place, just for notoriety in itself. Okay, so that concludes our talk about Pearl Gonzalez and Cynthia Calvillo. The next fight that I want to talk about is that Gegard Mousasi versus Chris Weidman fight. This is a crossroads fight. Gegard is one of the best middleweights in the UFC, in the world. He wins this one, and he's in line for that title shot. He's definitely in line for the title shot. There's a number of people that are, lining up to get a shot right now against Michael Bisping, but a win against Chris Weidman, and it definitely puts him in the queue for a shot. I don't see not an immediate shot, because there's a number of people ahead of him, but I think it sets him up for a big payday for this fight, and his next fight could be a major payday. Now you look around and you say Chris Weidman. And it's bizarre to say this, because Chris Weidman has been, former middleweight champion, the guy that ended Anderson Silva, who is one of my all-time favorite fighters, but the guy that ended the streak for Anderson Silva, and has been who was a pretty respectable champion. At one point, people were wondering, he may not never lose, to a situation where he's coming off 2 losses and 2 devastating KOs. And now Chris Weidman's kind of in the crosshairs of what happens next. If he loses this fight, especially by getting KO'd, that would be 3 losses in a row. He would be completely and totally out of the championship picture. I think he would have to, his best move if he lost would be he'd have to leave the middleweight division. And, a guy who looked like he was going to be a dominant champion for some time to come, maybe if he loses, maybe kind of forced to leave the division. And it's not that Chris has looked bad. Matter of fact, I think Chris has looked really good, actually. I thought he's looked quite impressive. I thought he was winning the Yoel Romero fight, but that knee came out of nowhere, and it was a wrap for him. And I don't think anyone would have been able to handle that. It was just one of those fluke situations where he just bad head placement, and he's on a two fight losing streak. But it's not like he's been his skills have slid at all. I think he looked quite impressive in that last Yoel Romero fight. If he But if he loses, he's in deep trouble. What happens if he wins? If he wins, I still say he's back in contention, but he's not right now. There's so many people ahead of him for a title shot that I could see a situation where maybe Anderson Silva, as a third fight with Anderson Silva, may be the best move for him after this fight if he wins. It's a very noteworthy fight. The first one was, some people say a fluke knockout. The second one was a freakish injury. So a third fight could be in order, and so, which would be a big payday for him. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Chris Weidman if he wins, and it's going to be, wow. If he loses, his world comes crashing down because he's so far the title picture that if he wants a title shot, he's going to have to move out of the division. When we come back, we're going to talk about a few other fights on this card. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, we're back. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. Remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, because we're always looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about the show. Tweet us your questions. We're going to start adding a segment where we're actually going to start answering questions from some of our listeners. Now, let's talk about some of the. We just covered what happened with the weigh-in for Daniel Cormier. We talked about the Pearl Gonzalez situation. We talked about the Gegard Mousasi versus Chris Weidman fight. Another fight that I'm very, very interested in is the lightweight battle between Charles Oliveira versus Will Brooks. This is a fight where you have two fighters that they're kind of right outside of the title picture. They're right outside of contending, and they can both kind of make a big statement against each other. Both fighters needs this win to kind of establish a foothold here. Will Brooks, who has been a long-time Bellator champion, came over to the UFC, looked spectacular in his very first UFC fight. His second one was, in my opinion, super controversial, because I think he just got I thought he had a raw deal all the way around. And that was that he fought Cowboy Oliveira, and Cowboy came in way overweight. So he did not make weight whatsoever. So he came in the much larger fighter. And it looks like he didn't even try to make weight. And then through the fight, Will Brooks is fighting a much larger fighter. The situation is Will Brooks ended up with a pretty serious rib injury. Will Brooks kept trying to fight through, but it was he ended up getting stopped just because he just couldn't perform with a rib injury. And anyone who's had any type of rib injury will tell you, back injuries, rib injuries are just brutal. You just can't make it through there. And it's just so hard to power through those type of injuries. So Will Brooks, I saw a thing where he's talking about how you just kind of have to have, a short memory. You just got to remember, you just got to forget about the fact that you just had a controversial loss and just deal with, and he said, and it's true, you have to deal with losses and wins. Even when you win, you can't get too hyped up on wins, and you sure can't let a loss bring you down too far. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Will Brooks because for people who haven't watched Will Brooks fight, he is a super talented guy. I truly see that he at some point he will contend for the title, for the lightweight title, because Will Brooks is just really talented. Oliveira is another very, very talented fighter. This is going to be a good fight. It's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see if this fight ends up on the ground or if Will Brooks' striking will be the factor in this one. But this fight will go a long ways in making that determination. Another interesting fight on this card is that Patrick Cote versus Thiago Alves, a welterweight battle. That's going to be a fun fight to watch, so keep an eye out for that one. And so that kind of concludes my kind of overview of the fights that I'm looking forward to seeing for this UFC 210 card. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is there's been a lot of talk about that Mayweather fight, and it looks like this fight is definitely gonna happen. Everyone's been kind of on board. Daniel's on board. Conor is definitely on board because you're looking at a situation where he's gonna make more money than he can make in his entire career, and just like I was looking at an interview that Dana White had put on, and he talked about how Conor has been nothing but, accommodating for the UFC, where he could have guys that couldn't make weight or guys that were out, he still stayed on the card to save a pay-per-view, and how he's gone out of his way to really be a great company man for them. And so how can they just deny him a fight where he can make that kind of money? So there's nothing that's going to stand in the way of this fight. And then an interesting turn of events. I have a friend of mine that lives in Vegas, and he's a boxer. And I was talking to him over this past week, and he was talking. He's friends with Floyd's uncle, and he was telling me that everything that he is seeing, this fight is going to happen. That court, and this is secondhand information, but everything that I'm hearing is this fight is set. They could make it. I mean, and I even heard that the decision could be, or an announcement could be made as early as by the end of this month, within the next week or two, that a decision could be made on this fight. One of the things from what I've heard is that the major sticking point is the money. Initially, I believe Conor was offered like 25 million, and that was a big issue for Conor. Now it looks like Conor's going to make anywhere between that 50 to 75 million, and Floyd's going to walk out of there between 100 and 150 million. That's what I'm hearing, and that everything is pretty much set, that the fight is going to happen in Vegas at the T-Mobile Arena. And like I told you guys, this is all secondhand. I didn't get this from Floyd. I get it from someone that knows, the family member from Floyd Mayweather. But it goes with pretty much what what I've been hearing outside of this. And this is someone that I truly do trust. I'm not trying to cause any, problems or anything. He was just sharing it with me, and I'm sharing it with you guys, so don't say anything. But I think everyone kind of knows this, but it looked like the major sticking point was, like I said, was Conor wasn't too happy about the offer of 20 million, and now it looks like he's going to get anywhere from 50 to 75 million now. And with that, Conor is 100% on board. That's kind of what I heard. So that concludes all the information I have on that situation, except for, I'm going to say this again. I'm a Floyd Mayweather fan. I've been a big boxing fan for a long time, and all the experts say that this is going to be a whitewash. I don't think it's going to be a whitewash. I think the fight's going to go to distance. I do give Conor a chance. It's going to be a much tougher fight than anyone realizes. Mayweather is that much older. Conor is a much larger fighter. I see this as a very interesting fight. Now, when we come back, we had an interview earlier this week where, especially with the fact that Bellator is having their it's Bellator Kickboxing 5. They have their event coming up this weekend as well, and I want to recognize that. We had Gaston Bolanos in the studio. He called in, and he did an interview, and we played it on one of our episodes. And we're going to end the show with that interview, just so that anyone that missed it, we can replay it. It's something that's definitely worth checking out if you're a kickboxing fan. So when we come back, we're going to have that interview. Gaston Bolanos, Bellator kickboxer. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, we're back, and now we have a special treat. We have Gaston Bolanos, Bellator superstar, kickboxing phenom, Muay Thai star, and he's on the line here. He's calling in to talk about his big Bellator kickboxing fight that's going to be airing on April 8th on Spike. Gaston, thanks for calling in. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for coming in, or calling in, that is. How are you doing so far?
Pretty well. I did my MMA debut earlier this year. Now going for my second fight in the year. Things have been going great. I've had two great camps back to back. Another tough fight coming up, so I'm living the dream, man. Super happy, super stoked, and super excited for this next fight. My first time in Europe too, so like I said, super excited.
Excellent. Talk to me about what you're expecting for this fight that you have scheduled with Luca Dos Santos.
I'm expecting a tough fight. I know my opponent has a lot more kickboxing experience than I do. It's his country. He's an Italian, and we're fighting in Turin, so I expect him to come out hard and trying to push the pace from the beginning. So I'm excited about that. I always like tough fights. I never like easy fights, so it's definitely gonna be a good fight for the crowd.
One of the things that I noticed when I went back and I started watching some of your previous fights, including your big win on Bellator 172, and some of your former Muay Thai fights, is you're a fighter that packs a lot of power and applies a lot of pressure. How is that going to translate into this fight that you have coming up here in April?
Well, definitely looking. I'm looking for power shots in this fight, but that's not the only thing I'm looking for. I need to set up those shots with other things such as my jab in combinations with my kicks. It's gonna be a little different than the last fight, given that was my first MMA fight. I was doing the transition into MMA. This is a little more similar to Muay Thai and to what I'm used to, so I'm gonna be able to do a lot more than I did on my last fight. So it's gonna be good. Like I said, I'm excited. I'm super excited to be able to go back and forth between MMA and kickboxing and be able to doing that the whole year. Is going to be amazing.
Now, you just fought in February and had a spectacular win, and now you're turning right back around with a really quick turnaround, and you're having a fight in April. Is that going to be a tough situation for you?
No, not at all. I'm looking to stay busy. I'm always in shape. I'm always training. This is my job. This is what I live to do this, and I love to do this. I love to live this life of being a professional fighter. So as many fights as I can get, I don't particularly care how far apart from each other they are. So I'm trying to be as busy as possible.
You know, I watched a number of your fights, and you have been spectacular all the way through them. But the one thing that is so exciting about you is those elbows and the spinning elbows that you deliver, and you have a fight coming up here that's going to be kickboxing. That's a part of your game that may be missing. What do you say?
Well, this fight is kickboxing, so elbows are not allowed, which is one of the things that I've been asked about a lot. But it's okay because people are going to be able to see other sides of me and other things that I've been working on in order to make this transition to MMA and kickboxing better for myself. So I'm not super worried about it. There's other flashy things that I'll be able to throw. But there's a lot of basic things such as combinations, hard jabs, hard crosses that I've been working on as well. So people are going to be able to see a completely different side of me as a fighter, and people are going to be able to see me involved as well as I do the transition to kickboxing.
One of the things that I noticed about when I watch your fights is that you're an action fighter. Anyone that's into watching spectacular knockouts or looking for spectacular action, you're the guy that delivers that. Is that something that you do by design? Is that something that you kind of go for, which would be the big knockout? And how does that affect your game plan for this fight here?
And that's a question that it has been asked to me throughout my whole career since I've been finishing fights so quickly. But I answer every single time. I always prepare myself. This time is a three-minute fight. I'm expecting for it to go the whole distance, and that's what I train for. I prepare for three hard rounds in a war. If the fight ends quicker because of a knockout, then good. But I'm prepared to go as hard as I can, as fast as I can for the whole fight. That's what I'm preparing for. I'm prepared for war, and that's what I'm expecting. That's what I want. I want to put on a show for the fans. I want to put on a show for the people and for everybody that's tuning in. But if the knockout does happen, then so be it.
As you prepare for your opponent and you watch film, what are some of the things that you are prepared for that you've seen that could cause you some problems?
I don't like to watch too much film to begin with. I did watch a little bit of it. He seems like a tough guy. He seems like a good fighter as well, and he's got a lot more experience than I do in kickboxing, so that's definitely going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to have to adjust to that real quickly in the fight because it's only 3 rounds, so I can't give away any free rounds. But yeah, I don't like to watch too much tape. I allow my corner, my coach, Kieran Fitzgibbons, to do that for me. I did watch a little bit, and given like our styles, I think it's going to be a great fight.
I see that you fight out of San Ramon here in Northern California. Here, is that where you do your entire camp, or do you go somewhere else to train or prepare for your fight?
Dublin, California, which is right next to San Ramon. But yeah, that's where I've been training for my whole career. That's where I trained for my last fight, and this is where my gym is at, Dublin, California.
I'm very familiar with Dublin. I'm actually in Sacramento, and I spent a lot of time down in the Bay Area, so I definitely am familiar with that area, being in the Bay Area. With it being your camp being so close to San Francisco, and there's so much to do in the city, do you ever find that a distraction? Does it ever pull you away from training or anything like that?
Well, like I said, I'm training all year round. This is what I do, and this is the life I live. So I don't let any distractions really get to me. I just try to train as much as possible, and I'm always in the gym. Whether it's training or teaching privates or teaching classes, I'm always at the gym.
I have to say that I've been truly impressed by your performance. And when I was watching Bellator 172, you had that spectacular knockout in the first round. And I was just kind of curious, what did you do to celebrate your first big win for being on the Bellator roster?
I had a little bit of an after party here nearby with a lot of my friends, a lot of people from the gym who took time out of their weekend to come watch me. But that next Monday, I was back in the gym. I didn't take too much time off. I only took Sunday off, really. And I was back in the gym on Monday because I knew this next fight in Italy would come up. So I didn't do too much to celebrate except the after party.
One of the things that I am super impressed by you on is the fact that you just had a big MMA victory, and now you are going to be fighting in a kickboxing event just a few months later, where most fighters tend to stay and, either just be a kickboxer or an MMA fighter. What made you go for both divisions?
Well, here's the thing. I like to stay busy throughout the year, and then this is definitely one of the best ways to do it. I love stand-up. I love combat sports. I love Muay Thai, and I love kickboxing as well. Now it's my new home. Bellator is my new home, and if they're offering that opportunity for me to be able to do both things, stay active, and throughout the year, then I'm gonna take the opportunity. I'm super thankful for the opportunity to do both and stay busy. A lot of these fighters, they fight, they take a month off or a few weeks off, then they get back in training, then they're waiting for a fight, and you only get to fight a couple times a year. It's already April, and I'm already doing 2 fights, and then I'm hoping to do hopefully 3 or 4 more. Who knows? I'm trying to stay busy throughout the year. Hopefully, if God allows me to, and there's no injuries.
I really agree with you with that philosophy. I think that's a really smart move on your part because it makes you really active and keeps you really sharp. Do you think that gives you an advantage over a lot of your opponents?
Well, ever since I was an amateur, when I was an amateur, I was fighting anywhere from 135 to 149. I will fight adults. I will fight juniors. I will fight anybody. I will take any fights, Muay Thai, kickboxing. I did a few MMA fights as well. I will take any fight just to try to get the experience. Now I'm kind of doing the same thing, just trying to build the same experience as a professional. And if I can do it with Bellator, then even better. So I'm fully taking advantage of that.
One more question before I let you go, because I know how you have such a very busy schedule there. My question is, what is your prediction for this fight? Do you predict a knockout, or do you predict that it'll go to distance? What's your thoughts on how you think the outcome is going to go about?
Like I said, he's a tough guy. He's got more experience in kickboxing than I do, which is fine. I expect what I want is I want a 3-round war fight. I want a hard fight, especially because I'm trying to get adjusted to the kickboxing rules. So that's what I'm predicting, a show for the fans.
Nicely said. I really wanted to thank you, Gaston, for doing this interview. I know how busy you are and taking time out of your day to spend time with myself and our audience. So I really wanted to say thank you, and we will definitely be tuning in to Bellator 176 to see your fight and rooting you on.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much.
All right, and you have a good rest of the day as well, sir.
You too, man.
All right, that was Gaston Bolanos, Bellator MMA fighter and Bellator kickboxing superstar that we just had an interview with. He said some interesting things there. First off, I'm so impressed by the fact that, a few fighters actually are willing to fight in multiple divisions, where he's willing to go in and fight an MMA fight in February and then turn around in April and fight a kickboxing event, where kickboxing is a dangerous sport. So is MMA. So the fact that he's willing to fight in both divisions is super impressive. It's incredibly smart because it keeps him really active, which means a lot more paychecks than most guys would have. He's right. It's April and he'll be 2 fights in. Beginning, I mean, he's probably going to be the most active fighter on the roster. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing his fight against Luca Dos Santos. That's going to be an interesting fight. Remember, that fight's going to be Saturday, April 8th on Bellator on Spike. The prelims will be on Spike.com, and then the main card will be on Spike TV. But I will definitely be tuning in to see this guy. You really need, he's super aggressive. He's a lot of fun to watch. I would highly recommend it. With that, this concludes our episode of the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys a little later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.